The old mop bucket wheels squeaked as Maria pushed it down the marble hallway of the Golden Gate Music Academy. It was past 9 in the evening, and the fancy building was finally quiet. During the day, this place buzzed with rich kids playing, expensive instruments and teachers who wore suits that probably cost more than Maria made in 3 months. Maria had been cleaning these halls for almost 2 years now. She knew every corner, every scratch on the wooden floors, every stain on the carpet that wouldn't come out no matter how hard she scrubbed. At 43, she moved a bit slower than she used to, but she never complained. This job paid the bills, and in America, that was more than many people had. She wore the same faded blue uniform every day, with her name stitched in small letters above the pocket. Her black hair was always pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she kept her head down when students or teachers walked by. Most of them didn't even see her. To them, she was just part of the building, like the walls or the fancy chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. Tonight felt different, though. The academy was preparing for their biggest event of the year, a fancy dinner where rich people would come to donate money. The staff had been running around all week, making sure everything was perfect. Maria had been working extra hours, cleaning, and polishing until her hands were raw. As she mopped near the main concert hall, she could hear someone practicing piano inside. The music drifted through the heavy wooden doors, and despite herself, Maria stopped to listen. It was a beautiful piece, though she could tell the student was struggling with some of the harder parts. The melody reminded her of something from long ago, something that made her chest feel tight. She closed her eyes for just a moment and let the music wash over her. In her mind, she could see her fingers moving across the keys, could feel the smooth ivory beneath her fingertips. But that was a different life, a different person. That was before everything changed. "Hey, you!" A sharp voice called out behind her. Maria jumped and turned around. One of the academy's security guards was walking toward her, looking annoyed. "You're not supposed to stop and listen," he said in English, speaking slowly like she was a child. "Just clean and move on." "Sorry," Maria replied quietly, her accent thick. She had been in America for 15 years, but English still felt like wearing shoes that didn't quite fit. The guard shook his head and walked away. Maria went back to mopping, but her ears were still tuned to the piano music. She knew that piece. It was Chopin, one of his nocturnes. She remembered learning it when she was 17, back in Romania. Her teacher had said she had natural talent, that she could go far if she worked hard, but life had other plans. Maria finished cleaning the hallway and moved to the next section. The academy was huge, with dozens of practice rooms, 3 concert halls, and offices that seemed to go on forever. She had learned to clean efficiently, moving like a ghost through the building. The faster she worked, the more time she had to listen to the music that seemed to seep from every room. In practice room 12, a young girl was playing violin. She couldn't be more than 16, but she was wearing clothes that probably cost more than Maria's monthly rent. The girl kept messing up the same section over and over, getting frustrated and starting again. Maria wanted to tell her to slow down, to feel the music instead of just playing the notes, but she kept walking. Down the hall, someone was playing cello. The deep, rich sound made Maria's heart ache with memories. She remembered sitting in the back row of the Bucharest Philharmonic, watching the cellists move their bows with such grace. She had dreamed of playing on that stage someday, dressed in a beautiful black gown, her family watching proudly from the audience. Instead, she was here, pushing a mop bucket and trying to be invisible. The main concert hall was Maria's least favorite place to clean, but also the one she loved most. It was where the academy held their big performances, with red velvet seats and a stage that seemed to glow under the lights. The piano sat in the center, a massive black grand piano that probably cost more than most people's houses. Maria always saved this room for last. When she was done cleaning, she would sometimes sit in the back row for just a few minutes, imagining what it would feel like to walk across that stage. She never touched the piano, never even got close, but she looked at it like it was an old friend she couldn't visit. Tonight, as she cleaned the windows and polished the wooden seats, Maria found herself humming softly. It was an old Romanian folk song her grandmother used to sing, simple and sweet. She didn't even realize she was doing it until she heard her own voice echoing in the empty hall. The sound startled her. She looked around quickly, making sure no one had heard. The last thing she needed was to get in trouble for making noise. This job was all she had, and she couldn't afford to lose it. Maria's life in America hadn't been easy. She had come here with big dreams and $500 in her pocket. She thought she would find work as a piano teacher, maybe play in small restaurants or hotels. But without proper papers, without connections, without perfect English, those doors stayed closed. So she cleaned offices, then factories, then finally found this job at the academy. It wasn't what she had planned, but it was honest work. And sometimes, late at night when the building was empty, she could pretend she belonged in this world of music. Her family back in Romania didn't know the whole truth. In her letters, she told them about working at a music school, which was technically true. She just didn't mention that she cleaned it instead of teaching in it. Her mother was proud, telling the neighbors that her daughter worked with famous musicians in America. Maria didn't have the heart to correct her. As she finished cleaning the concert hall, Maria heard footsteps in the hallway. She quickly gathered her supplies and headed for the supply closet. It was probably just another security guard making his rounds, but she didn't want to explain why she was taking so long in the fancy hall. Tomorrow would be the big fundraising dinner. The academy would be full of wealthy people eating expensive food and writing big checks. Maria would be there too, but in the kitchen, washing dishes and staying out of sight. She would hear the music from the other room and imagine being part of it, but she would remain invisible, just like always. But sometimes, late at night in her small apartment, Maria would sit at her old keyboard, a cheap electronic one she had bought at a pawn shop. She would play softly so the neighbors wouldn't complain, and for those few minutes she would remember who she used to be. Her fingers still knew the music, even after all these years of holding mops instead of playing melodies. She never imagined that tomorrow night would change everything, that one moment of cruelty would become the door to a new life. For now, she was just Maria, the cleaning lady, invisible and forgotten, carrying 15 years of silence and a lifetime of music locked away in her heart. The night of the big fundraising dinner arrived like a storm Maria wasn't ready for. She had been working since 4 in the afternoon, helping set up tables, polishing silverware, and making sure every glass sparkled under the fancy lights. The academy had transformed into something magical, with white tablecloths, fresh flowers, and candles that made everything glow. Maria stayed in the kitchen most of the evening, washing dishes and refilling water pitchers. Through the service doors, she could see glimpses of the main dining hall. Women in expensive dresses laughed and chatted, their jewelry catching the light. Men in perfect suits talked business while sipping wine that probably cost more than Maria made in a week. She tried to stay invisible, just like always. But tonight felt different. There was electricity in the air, a tension she couldn't quite understand. Maybe it was because this dinner was so important to the academy, or maybe it was something else entirely. Around 9 o'clock, after the main course had been served, Maria was told to help clear tables. She grabbed a tray and walked carefully into the dining room, keeping her eyes down. The conversations were loud and cheerful, full of laughter and the clinking of glasses. That's when she noticed her, a woman at table 5 who seemed to command attention wherever she looked. She was probably in her 50s with perfectly styled blonde hair and a dress that screamed money. Everything about her was polished and sharp, from her red lipstick to her diamond earrings that caught the light every time she moved her head. The woman's name was Catherine, and Maria had heard the other staff talking about her. She was one of the academy's biggest donors, someone who could write a check that would fund the school for months. But there was something cold about her smile, something that made Maria uncomfortable even from across the room. As Maria quietly collected empty plates, she couldn't help but overhear Catherine's conversation. The woman was talking loudly, making sure everyone at nearby tables could hear her stories about expensive vacations and charity events. She seemed to enjoy being the center of attention, and her friends hung on every word. "You know," Catherine said, her voice carrying across the room, I just love seeing how the other half lives. It's so authentic. Her friends laughed, though Maria wasn't sure why. There was something mean hiding behind that laughter, something that made her want to disappear even more than usual. Maria was clearing glasses from a nearby table when disaster struck. Her elbow bumped against a water pitcher, and she watched in horror as it tipped over, sending cold water cascading across the white tablecloth and onto the floor. The crash was loud enough to make several people turn and look. "Oh no," Maria whispered, her face burning with embarrassment. She quickly grabbed napkins and started trying to clean up the mess, her hands shaking. "Well, well," came Catherine's voice from behind her. "Look what we have here." Maria felt dozens of eyes on her as she knelt on the floor, sopping up water with paper towels. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the expensive carpet and never be seen again. "I'm so sorry," Maria said quietly, her accent thick with nervousness. "I clean it up." "Very sorry." Catherine stood up from her table, and Maria could see her expensive high heels getting closer. The whole dining room seemed to have gone quiet, like everyone was watching a show they didn't want to miss. "You know what I find fascinating?" Catherine announced to the room, her voice loud and theatrical, "is how some people just exist in our world without really being part of it." Maria's stomach dropped. She could feel something bad coming, like a storm building on the horizon. "I mean, here we are," Catherine continued, gesturing around the room, "surrounded by all this beautiful music and culture, and yet some people live their entire lives without ever truly experiencing it." A few people chuckled nervously. The Academy's director tried to step forward, probably to defuse the situation, but Catherine wasn't finished. "Take our friend here," she said, pointing down at Maria, who was still on her knees cleaning up water. "I bet she's worked in this beautiful academy for years, hearing all this magnificent music. But has she ever really understood it? Has she ever actually participated in the culture she's surrounded by?" Maria's face burned with shame. She wanted to stand up and walk away, but her legs felt frozen. Around her, she could hear whispers and see people pulling out their phones. Some were probably texting, but others were definitely recording. "You know what would be amusing?" Catherine said, and Maria could hear the cruel smile in her voice. "I think our cleaning lady should play something for us on that beautiful piano over there." The suggestion hit the room like a bomb. Some people gasped, others laughed nervously, and a few tried to protest. But Catherine was already walking toward the grand piano that sat at the front of the room, used earlier by a professional musician during dinner. "Oh, come now," Catherine called out to the crowd. "Don't you think it would be entertaining? Let's see what years of listening have taught her." Maria finally found the strength to stand up. Her whole body was shaking, and she felt sick to her stomach. "No, please," she said quietly. "I just work here. I clean." But Catherine wasn't listening. She was already at the piano, running her perfectly manicured fingers along the polished surface. "Everyone gather around," she announced. "Let's have some real entertainment." The crowd began to move, some reluctantly, others with curiosity. Maria could see phones being held up, cameras ready to record whatever happened next. She knew that in minutes, whatever happened here would be all over social media. "Please," Maria said again, but her voice was so quiet that hardly anyone heard. Catherine's friends were encouraging her, laughing and clapping as if this was the best idea they'd heard all night. "Make her play something classical," one of them called out. "Let's see if she knows the difference between Mozart and McDonald's jingle." The laughter that followed was sharp and mean. Maria felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she blinked them back. She wouldn't give these people the satisfaction of seeing her cry. "I don't play," Maria said louder this time. "I just clean. Please, I go back to kitchen now." But Catherine wasn't giving up. She had found her entertainment for the evening, and she wasn't about to let it go. "Oh, don't be modest," she said in a fake sweet voice. "I'm sure you've learned something from all that listening. Just play us a little something. Anything will do." The crowd was getting bigger now, forming a circle around the piano. Maria felt trapped, like an animal in a cage with nowhere to run. She could see the academy director looking uncomfortable, but he wasn't stopping it either. These were the people who paid his salary who kept the academy running. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Come on, play something," and others began to join in. It started as encouragement, but quickly turned into chanting. "Play, play, play," Maria's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold them steady. The room felt like it was spinning and she could hear her heart beating in her ears. All those faces staring at her, all those phones recording, waiting for her to fail and give them something to laugh about. She looked at the piano, the beautiful, perfect grand piano that she had admired from afar for 2 years. In any other situation, she would have been honored to even touch those keys, but now it felt like a trap, a stage set for her humiliation. I can't," she whispered, but her voice was lost in the noise of the crowd. Catherine smiled triumphantly and patted the piano bench. "Don't worry, dear. We're not expecting Carnegie Hall. Just play us something simple. Surely you know Twinkle, Twinkle Little Star." The condescending tone in her voice made Maria's chest tighten with a mixture of fear and something else, something that had been sleeping for 15 years but was starting to wake up. Maria stood frozen in front of the grand piano, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. The crowd had grown larger, and she could see at least 20 phones pointed at her, ready to capture whatever happened next. The chanting had died down, but the expectation in the room was thick as fog. Catherine stood beside her with that cruel smile, one hand resting on the piano like she owned it. "Go ahead, dear," she said in that fake sweet voice. "We're all waiting." Maria's hands were trembling as she looked down at the keys. They were perfect, white as fresh snow, black as midnight, each one polished to a mirror shine. She hadn't touched a real piano in over 3 years. The cheap keyboard in her apartment was nothing like this beautiful instrument. Maybe she doesn't actually know how to play. Someone whispered from the crowd, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Of course she doesn't," another voice replied. "This is going to be hilarious." Maria could feel tears building behind her eyes, but something else was building too. Deep in her chest, something that had been sleeping for 15 long years was starting to stir. It was anger, but not the hot, explosive kind. This was something colder, something that had been waiting patiently for its moment. She sat down on the piano bench and the crowd got quieter. Even Catherine stepped back, probably expecting to hear some clumsy attempt at "Mary Had a Little Lamb," or maybe nothing at all. Maria could see people holding up their phones higher, making sure they got the perfect angle for her failure. For a moment, Maria just sat there, staring at the keys. In her mind, she could hear her old teacher's voice from 25 years ago. "Music is not about showing off, Maria. It's about truth. When you play, you must tell the truth, even if it hurts." The truth. What was her truth? Her truth was 15 years of silence, 15 years of hiding who she really was. 15 years of pretending that the music in her heart had died when she left Romania. 15 years of watching other people live the life she had given up. But music doesn't die. It just waits. Maria placed her hands on the keys and something magical happened. The moment her fingers touched the smooth ivory, the room around her seemed to fade away. The cruel faces, the phone cameras, Catherine's mocking smile, all of it became background noise. She didn't start with something simple. She didn't play "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" like Catherine had suggested. Instead, she began with something that had been living in her heart for decades, Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor. The first notes were soft, almost whispered, like someone telling a secret. The crowd was still expecting failure, still waiting for the joke to begin. But as Maria's fingers found their rhythm, as the melody began to build, something in the room shifted. This wasn't the playing of someone who had learned a few songs from YouTube videos. This was the playing of someone who understood music from the inside out, someone who had spent years learning not just the notes, but the soul behind them. Maria's posture changed as she played. Her shoulders straightened, her head lifted, And for the first time in 15 years, she looked like who she really was. The scared cleaning lady disappeared, replaced by the musician she had always been underneath. The melody flowed from her, fingers like water from a spring. Each note was perfect, not because she was trying to be perfect, but because this was her language. This was how she spoke when words weren't enough. The crowd had gone completely silent. Phones that had been held up to record her failure were now capturing something entirely different. People who had been smirking were now staring with their mouths open. Catherine's cruel smile had vanished completely. As the piece continued, Maria closed her eyes and let the music take her home. She was 17 again, playing for her grandmother on Sunday afternoons. She was 22, performing her first recital to a packed auditorium in Bucharest. She was every age she had ever been, and every dream she had ever dreamed was flowing through her fingers. The technical parts that had made the student struggle earlier that week were nothing to Maria. Her fingers danced across the keys like they had never left. Like 15 years of silence had been just a brief pause between movements. The music was complex and demanding, full of runs and trills that would challenge even professional pianists. But Maria wasn't just playing the notes. She was telling a story. Her story. The gentle parts spoke of childhood and innocence. The dramatic sections told of heartbreak and sacrifice. The powerful crescendos were all the words she had never been able to say in English, all the dreams she had locked away, all the music that had been building up inside her for 15 years. People in the crowd began to lean forward, drawn in, by something they didn't quite understand but couldn't resist. This wasn't just music, this was magic. This was transformation happening right in front of their eyes. An older man near the back of the crowd wiped tears from his eyes. He had been a professional musician once and knew immediately that he was hearing something extraordinary. A young woman who had been laughing just minutes before found herself holding her breath, afraid to make any sound that might break the spell. Even the Academy director, who had seen hundreds of performances over the years, stood transfixed. He had never heard the Academy's piano played with such emotion, such perfect technique combined with raw, honest feeling. Maria's fingers flew across the keys in the most challenging section of the piece. Notes cascaded like waterfalls, powerful and precise. Her left hand provided a thunderous bass line while her right hand sang the melody above it. This was music that demanded everything from the performer: technical skill, emotional depth, physical stamina, and absolute fearlessness. And Maria gave it everything. Every year of silence, every night of dreaming, every moment of feeling invisible, it all poured out through the music. She wasn't playing for the crowd anymore. She wasn't even playing for herself. She was playing for every dream that had ever been pushed aside, every talent that had ever been hidden, every person who had ever been made to feel small. As the piece moved toward its climax, the room seemed to vibrate with the power of the music. The grand piano, which had sat silent and elegant for so many formal dinners, was finally being used for what it was made for. Every string, every hammer, every piece of wood and metal was singing together in perfect harmony. Catherine stood frozen, her face pale. This wasn't supposed to happen. This was supposed to be a joke, a moment of cruel entertainment at the expense of someone she considered beneath her. Instead, she was witnessing something that was making her look small and petty in front of everyone who mattered. The final section of the ballade was like a conversation between Maria's heart and the piano. Soft and tender, then building to moments of incredible power, then returning to whispers that seemed to float in the air like prayers. Her touch was so sensitive that she could make the piano sing or cry or laugh, sometimes all within the span of a few measures. As the last notes rang out in the perfect acoustics of the dining hall, Maria slowly opened her eyes. For a moment, the room was completely silent. Not the uncomfortable silence of people waiting for something to laugh at, but the sacred silence that follows something beautiful and true. Then, slowly, one person began to clap. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, the entire room erupted in applause that seemed to shake the walls. People were standing, cheering, some crying openly. Phones that had been recording for social media mockery were now capturing something they knew they would want to watch again and again. The applause seemed to go on forever. Maria sat on the piano bench, still in shock from what had just happened. Her hands were resting on her lap, and she could hardly believe they had just played one of the most difficult pieces in classical music. For 15 years, she had wondered if she could still do it. Now she knew. People were crowding around the piano, all talking at once. She heard words like incredible and amazing and unbelievable, but it all felt like it was happening to someone else. Just 30 minutes ago, she had been washing dishes in the kitchen. Now she was surrounded by some of the richest and most important people in the city, and they were all looking at her with something she had never seen before: respect. An older gentleman pushed through the crowd. Maria recognized him as Dr. Richardson, one of the Academy's board members. His eyes were still wet from tears, and his voice shook when he spoke. "My dear," he said, taking her hand gently, "where did you learn to play like that?" Before Maria could answer, someone else spoke up. "Are you kidding me? That was Chopin's Ballad No. 1. I've heard professional pianists mess that up. How does a cleaning lady play it perfectly?" The question hung in the air, and Maria felt dozens of eyes on her again. But this time was different. They weren't looking at her like she was entertainment or a joke. They were looking at her like she was a mystery they desperately wanted to solve. I studied music," Maria said quietly, her accent thick with emotion. "Long time ago, in Romania." "Studied music?" Dr. Richardson repeated. "Where? With whom?" Maria took a deep breath. She had kept this secret for so long that saying it out loud felt like jumping off a cliff. "Bucharest Music Academy. I was concert pianist. Before I come to America." The crowd erupted in whispers. People were pulling out their phones again, but not to mock her this time. They were searching for information, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. A young woman near the front of the crowd held up her phone. "I'm looking up the Bucharest Music Academy online. This is one of the most prestigious music schools in Eastern Europe. They only accept the most talented students in the country." Another person shouted from the back. Someone recorded the whole thing. "It's already being shared on social media." Maria's stomach dropped. Social media meant the whole world would see this. What if her family in Romania found out she had been lying about her life in America? What if they discovered she had been cleaning floors instead of playing concerts? But as she looked around the room, she saw something that surprised her. Instead of judgment or pity, she saw excitement. These people weren't looking down on her for being a cleaning lady. They were amazed that someone so talented had been hidden right under their noses. Catherine, who had started this whole mess, was standing at the back of the crowd now. Her face was red, and she looked like she wanted to disappear. People who had been laughing at her cruel joke just an hour ago were now giving her dirty looks. Someone near her whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I can't believe you tried to humiliate her." That was disgusting. Dr. Richardson was still holding Maria's hand. "My dear, why didn't you tell us? Why are you working as a janitor when you have this incredible gift?" Maria felt tears coming to her eyes. How could she explain 15 years of struggle? How could she tell them about the language barriers, the lack of connections, the desperate need for any job that would pay the bills? "When I come to America," she began slowly, "I have nothing. No papers, no money, no English. Music doesn't pay bills when you have no one to help you. So I clean, I work, I survive." An elegant woman in a blue dress stepped forward. Maria recognized her as Mrs. Chen, another major donor to the academy. "But surely someone would have hired you to teach piano or to perform." Maria shook her head sadly. "I try. I go to music schools, to restaurants, to hotels. But my English is bad and I have no, how you say, recommendations from American teachers. No one wants to take chance on cleaning lady from Romania." The room fell quiet as people absorbed this. Many of them had probably never thought about how difficult it must be for immigrants to use their skills in a new country. They lived in a world where talent was always recognized and rewarded, but Maria's story was showing them a different reality. A young man in the crowd held up his phone excitedly. The video is going viral. It already has over 1,000 shares. And people are calling it the hidden talent and the cleaning lady secret. The views are climbing every minute. Maria's heart started racing. Viral? What does this mean? It means millions of people are going to see your performance, Dr. Richardson explained gently. The whole world is about to discover what we just discovered. As if to prove his point, phones throughout the room started buzzing with notifications. People were getting messages from friends and family who had already seen the video online. The story was spreading faster than anyone could have imagined. Mrs. Chen was scrolling through her phone. "Look at these comments," she said, reading aloud. This made me cry. How is she not performing at Carnegie Hall? This is what real talent looks like. I can't stop watching this. A man near the piano called out. The local news station just shared it. Channel 7 is calling it the performance that shocked the city's elite. Maria felt overwhelmed. Just hours ago she had been invisible. Now strangers all over the world were watching her play piano and talking about her story. It was too much to process. Dr. Richardson seemed to understand her confusion. Maria, he said gently, this is a good thing. People are seeing your talent, and they're going to want to help you share it with the world. But I am just cleaning, lady, Maria whispered. No, said Mrs. Chen firmly. You were never just a cleaning lady. You were always a pianist who happened to clean buildings to survive. There's a big difference. Someone in the crowd shouted, she should be performing. Here, not cleaning here. Others began agreeing loudly. The academy should hire her as a teacher. She should give concerts. This is incredible talent that's being wasted. The academy director, who had been quiet through most of this, finally stepped forward. His face was pale, and Maria could tell he was realizing how badly the academy had failed to recognize the treasure that had been working in their building for 2 years. Maria, he said formally, I think we need to have a very long conversation tomorrow morning. The academy has clearly made a terrible mistake. As the crowd continued to buzz with excitement and phones continued to ring with notifications, Maria sat quietly on the piano bench where it all began. The instrument that had been her downfall 30 minutes ago was now the key to a future she had stopped dreaming about years ago. But the most amazing part wasn't the viral video or the sudden attention. It was the look in people's eyes when they saw her now. For the first time in 15 years, people were seeing the real Maria, not the invisible cleaning lady, but the artist who had never really disappeared, just learned to hide. The night that had started with humiliation was turning into something completely different. It was turning into a new beginning, and Maria was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late for dreams to come true. 6 months later, Maria stood in front of a mirror in a small dressing room, hardly recognizing the woman looking back at her. Instead of her faded blue cleaning uniform, she wore an elegant black dress that flowed like music itself. Her hair, usually pulled back in a simple ponytail, was styled beautifully. But the biggest change wasn't what she wore. It was the light in her eyes. Tonight was the night she had dreamed about for 25 years. She was about to perform at the city's most prestigious concert hall, the Golden Symphony Center, the same venue where she had bought a cheap seat in the back row 3 years ago, just to remember what it felt like to hear live classical music. A gentle knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. 5 minutes, Maria, came the voice of her manager, a kind woman who had reached out the day after the video went viral. The video. Maria still couldn't believe what had happened in those 6 months since that night at the academy. The recording of her performance had been watched over 50 million times across different platforms. News stations from around the world had interviewed her. Music critics had written articles calling her a rare talent hidden in plain sight. But the most amazing thing wasn't the fame or the attention. It was how it had changed her relationship with her family. When her mother in Romania saw the video, she called crying, not from sadness but from pride. I always knew, her mother had said through happy tears. I always knew the music was still inside you. Her brother had flown to America for tonight's concert, the first time they had seen each other in 15 years. Earlier that day, he had held her hands and said, "You never stopped being a musician, sister. You just took a very long intermission." There was another knock on the door. "Maria, it's Dr. Richardson. May I come in?" She opened the door to find the elderly board member who had first recognized her talent that night. Over the past months, he had become like a grandfather to her, helping her navigate the sudden changes in her life. "How are you feeling?" he asked gently. "Scared," Maria admitted. "What if I disappoint them? What if people expect too much now?" Dr. Richardson smiled. "Do you know how many people are out there tonight?" Maria shook her head. She had been too nervous to look at the audience. 2,000 people, he said, and every single ticket sold out in less than an hour. People flew in from other countries just to hear you play. Your family is in the front row, the mayor is here. Even some students from your old school in Romania came. Maria's eyes widened. "Students from Bucharest? Your old piano teacher is here too, Professor Petrov. He's 90 years old now, but he insisted on coming. He said he always wondered what happened to his most talented student." Tears formed in Maria's eyes. Professor Petrov had been like a father to her when she was young. She thought she would never see him again. "But you know what the most beautiful thing is?" Dr. Richardson continued. "Half the audience tonight are people who work regular jobs, janitors, waitresses, factory workers, immigrants like yourself. When your story spread, it gave hope to people who thought their dreams were dead. They saved up money to buy tickets because they see themselves in you." Maria wiped her eyes carefully, trying not to mess up her makeup. "I just want to play well. I want to make them proud." "My dear," Dr. Richardson said softly, "you already have. Just by being yourself, just by not giving up, you've already made us all proud." As he left, Maria looked at herself in the mirror one more time. She thought about Catherine, the woman who had tried to humiliate her that night. Catherine had actually written her a letter 2 weeks after the video went viral. It was a real apology, not just words to make herself look better. She had donated a large sum of money to create a scholarship fund for immigrant musicians, and she had asked for nothing in return. "I was wrong," the letter had said. "I saw only what I expected to see, and I missed the beautiful person right in front of me. Thank you for teaching me to look deeper." Maria had framed that letter and hung it in her new apartment, not because she was proud of forgiving Catherine, but because it reminded her that people could change, just like she had changed. Another knock came. "It's time," her manager called softly. Maria walked down the hallway toward the stage, her heart pounding with each step. She could hear the murmur of the crowd beyond the curtain. 2,000 people, all waiting to hear her play. She paused at the edge of the stage and peeked through the curtain. The concert hall was magnificent, with golden walls and crystal chandeliers that sparkled like stars. Every seat was filled, and people were standing in the aisles. In the front row, she could see her brother wiping tears from his eyes before. She had even played a note. Next to him sat an elderly man with kind eyes, Professor Petrov. Even from the stage, she could see him smile and nod at her, the same encouraging gesture he had made 25 years ago when she was nervous before her first recital. The academy director was there too, along with Mrs. Chen and Dr. Richardson. But scattered throughout the audience were faces she didn't recognize, ordinary people who had been touched by her story, who had seen that it's never too late to chase your dreams. The lights dimmed, and Maria walked onto the stage. The applause was thunderous, lasting several minutes. She sat at the grand piano, an instrument even more beautiful than the one at the academy, and placed her hands on the keys. For tonight's concert, she had chosen pieces that told her story. She started with the same Chopin ballade that had changed her life 6 months ago, but this time she wasn't playing it as Maria the cleaning lady fighting for respect. She was playing it as Maria the pianist, sharing her gift with people who truly wanted to hear it. As the music filled the concert hall, Maria felt something she had never experienced before: complete peace. For 15 years, she had felt like she was living someone else's life. Tonight, she was finally home. During the softer passages, the audience was so quiet she could hear her own breathing. During the powerful sections, she could feel the energy. In the room, 2,000 hearts beating in rhythm with the music. When she finished the ballade, the applause was even louder than before. But Maria wasn't done. She played pieces by Mozart, by Rachmaninoff, by Liszt. Each one was perfect, not because she never made mistakes, but because she played with such honesty that small imperfections became part of the beauty. For her final piece, she chose something special, a Romanian folk song that her grandmother used to sing, arranged for piano. As the simple, beautiful melody filled the hall, many people in the audience began to cry. It was the sound of home, of memory, of dreams that refuse to die no matter how long they wait. When the last note faded away, the entire audience rose to their feet. The applause went on for 10 minutes, with people shouting "Bravo" and throwing flowers onto the stage. Maria stood and bowed, tears streaming down her face. But the most precious moment came when she saw Professor Petrov in the front row. The old man was standing with tears in his eyes, clapping slowly and deliberately. He caught her eye and mouthed the words he used to say after her best performances. That was music from the soul. As Maria took her final bow, she thought about the long journey that had brought her to this moment. From a young girl with dreams in Romania, to a struggling immigrant cleaning floors, to a woman standing on one of the world's most famous stages. The cleaning lady was still part of her story, and she was proud of that woman who had survived and persevered. But tonight, Maria was exactly who she was always meant to be, a musician sharing her gift with the world, proving that it's never too late for dreams to find their way home.